Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our special webinar celebrating International Women's Day. Today, we gather under the powerful theme of Accelerate Action to spotlight the transformative role that women are playing in the world of AI. I'm thrilled to have so many of you passionate minds here, ready to be inspired by stories of innovation and groundbreaking leadership from some amazing Australian women. I'm going to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet. I pay my respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to my First Nations people here today. I'm coming to you from Euro Yurok Yakut Willem country of the Boonwurrung language group, which is here, which spreads all the way from Werribee Bayside, and I'm here in St Kilda. And I welcome you all from whatever lands you're coming from. I wanted to just share a little bit about the National AI Centre. We're about accelerating positive AI adoption and innovation that benefits Australia's business and community. And today we're going to be sharing about the work that some amazing women are doing in growing a responsible AI industry in Australia. We're also supported by some incredible AI adopt centres. And I wanted to share this because I think a lot of you on the call are thinking about AI adoption. And so we work with ARAIN, who's doing work in the regions. We work with SAM, who's doing work in responsible AI. We work with SMEC, who's doing a lot of work in helping you accelerate your AI businesses, as well as ArmHub AI Adopt Centre, who do a lot of work in the data and robotics area. And as well, and I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with the Responsible AI Network, which has been bringing webinars since 2022. And we work around these different areas around law, standards, design, leadership, principles, technology, and governance. And we work with some very special partners, including CEDAR, AI Group, Standards Australia, Gradient Institute, Tech Council, etc. But today is about the National AI Centre wanting to be proud and focus on the economic empowerment of women in AI. As we all know, the AI landscape is rapidly evolving, and women are at the forefront of driving that change, building companies, creating technologies, and reshaping industries. Our goal today is to shine a light on these achievements and empower more women to take bold steps into the world of AI entrepreneurship. Throughout this webinar, you'll hear from a trio of trailblazers who have not only built AI companies here in Australia, but have broken barriers to pave the way for future generations. Their journeys are a testament to the power and innovation and importance of diversity in technology. Let me introduce the speakers. Firstly, we have Annie, who is the visionary builder of Build Club. And Annie leads Australia's largest AI developer community and has recently secured an impressive 1.2 million in venture capital funding. Her work not only fuels technology advancements, but it creates a thriving ecosystem for developers across the nation and now the world. So Annie's experience reminds us that success in AI is driven by community, collaboration, and relentless passion. We're also honoured to welcome Fiona Turner, the CEO and founder of Bitwise Agronomy. Fiona is based in Tasmania and has revolutionised ag tech with her innovation in AI models, and actually has the largest blueberry model in the world. Her groundbreaking work in agriculture is a perfect example of how AI can be harnessed to solve real-world challenges, ensuring sustainability practices while boosting economic growth. And Fiona's story is a really vibrant illustration of creativity and meeting purpose in unexpected ways. And I think you're going to love hearing from her. And lastly, but very important as well, is Kristen Miglioroni. She's a very important part of the family of the National AI Centre and the founder of Komply.ai, who's leading the conversation around governance, risk and compliance. Her work is pivotal in ensuring that we push the boundaries of technologies and we also maintain the highest standards of responsible AI and operational integrity. And I can't wait to hear her insights in this as we navigate the complexity of the world driven by AI. Now, I've made it sound pretty exciting, but it's the women that you want to hear from. So I'm going to hand over to Fee, who's going to talk to us a little bit about her journey in creating Bitwise and what that was like. So over to you, Fee.
Hi everyone, and thanks for the intro, Rita, and thanks for having me. Yeah, it's a little bit about Bitwise Agronomy. So we use computer vision to understand what soft fruits, so raspberries, strawberries, blackberries, and blueberries, are available for picking on any given day on a farm. Our farmers take a GoPro camera. They capture about 5% of their area of interest, and they do that on video. So they'll attach the GoPro to their tractors or other farm machinery. Sometimes we integrate with robotics as well. They upload that imagery into our portal. It has to be captured offline because most farms aren't connected. So there's a little bit of a barrier there. But they upload this data, and then we have produced artificial intelligence, computer vision artificial intelligence, that look at the different phenological stages of the berry from a flower through to a pickable fruit. We then take those counts and do a whole lot of things with it to understand what the total yield is. But one of the things that we do is we overlay it with our ripening curves that gives us information about how a piece of fruit may ripen over time, with a lot of other parameters in there. And then that gives us a highly accurate yield forecast. We started because I had a career in digital transformation. I was working in the automation world, building sort of smart factories and manless factories and smart cities. And, you know, I happened to move to Tasmania with my husband and buy a vineyard. I was traveling all over for my job, and we were putting vision systems in for label placement and quality and things like that. And this was sort of about 8 years ago. And my vineyard was just out of control. And I was like, well, why don't I bring both of my worlds together and use AI to let me understand what's going on my own farm. And so, you know, 5 years later, you know, where we are with Bitwise. To give you a bit of an idea of where we're at, let me just take control there. We have customers all around the world. We chose to look globally right from the beginning because the berry industry here in Australia is quite small. Our 5 biggest customers globally bring in over $5 billion in US billion dollars in revenue a year. So, you know, they're very large growers in terms of the size and the value. 95% of our customers, are overseas. We have customers in, you know, South America and Europe and the UK and China. We manage this AI and do all this remotely for our customers. A little bit about the stats about what we do. So just last year alone, by sort of using the GoPro camera, we counted 1.8 trillion pieces of fruit. So when we look at sort of extrapolate that out to what we're forecast for, you know, that 1.8 trillion is just 5% of what we forecasted to hit the market. We captured 8,500 kilometers of GoPro video that were uploaded into our portal. And on average, we have about 6 terabytes of data a month that's uploaded. And we're able to process that data through our neural nets within 12 hours and give a forecast back to our customers so they can make almost real-time decisions the next day about what's happening with their crops. So ripening curves are a really important part of what we do, and we use our AI counting data to generate these. And so we've got over 200 ripening curves for over 60 different genetic types within the berries, you know, which is a lot. That's sort of more than any sort of genetics company has about their own berries. And you know, when we look at what we've done over the years, you know, the AI is hard, but I think one of the biggest achievements that we've had is how to process so much data so fast to give a meaningful result to our customers. And so over the years, we've been able to collect over 3 petabytes of images of berry farms. So it represents about 40 growing seasons globally. So what's next for Bitwise is, you know, starting to mine this data and build machine learning models across that to really understand on a regional level what can be done with these data, this data sets. And as we said, you know, these are the biggest data sets in the world for berries. So we've pretty much seen you know, anything that's there. And the value for the customer is, you know, if they don't know what they're forecasting, they can't give confidence to the supply chain. And when they give hey, we've got 100 tonnes coming to market next week and 100 tonnes the week after that, the commercial arm of the business then has to go sell that into supermarkets or wholesalers or Harrods or Costco's or whoever it may be. And they can't get the best price for those fruit unless they've got confidence. And if you get that price wrong, if you get your forecast wrong and you under forecast, over in Europe, you've got to buy fruit off the market. So there's a financial penalty. And if you over forecast and bring too much fruit to the market, you get a financial penalty. So you don't get, you know, instead of getting $22 a kg, you might get $3 a kg. So these massive berry companies are losing millions and millions of dollars a year because they're not able to forecast, which is hitting their bottom line. And so that's what we solve, and that's a little bit about us.
That was incredible, Fee. And I think just to put it into perspective, you know, ChatGPT was trained on one petabyte of data. So it's less amazing just to see the amount of data you've collected. And I totally love the word ripening curve. I think it's just such an exciting new algorithm way of communicating that side of things. So congratulations. Now, everyone that's on the call, Fee is going to be with us for the whole time. So we're going to have some questions. I know you'll have some questions. I have questions too, but I'm going to save my question to the end, and I'm going to ask Kristen to tell us a little bit about Komply.ai, and just a little clap from me as well to you, Fee. And I'm looking forward to Kristen sharing a bit about her company and her journey.
Thank you, Rita. And I just wanted to have a big call out to the National AI Centre and people like Rita and Eloise and team. I think you do an exceptional job in the Australian market in AI, and particularly drawing a light to founders. So, you know, you should definitely be congratulated for doing that. So thank you for giving us a platform to do what we need to do as founders in this country. So I really want to recognise your contribution as well. So thank you for that. But yeah, I'll take a bit of a personal approach, I think, to this discussion, because I think people really love to hear a founder's story and where we first began. So I essentially built Komply.ai to build and to solve a problem I had. So I was a technology lawyer, IP litigator for over 20 years, from global law firms to in-house legal counsel. And I had my own legal practice. And I was running due diligence for venture capital, private equity. And what I found when I was doing those deals, that it was incredibly difficult to do risk assessments of AI tech companies. You know, you'd sort of end up in a standoff with their data scientist and, you know, in a room trying to work out whether or not there was concern with the acquisition of the tech. So essentially, I started off doing some study at MIT AI Computer Lab in the US. It was an online program, and I was trying to build something or test this thesis. Can we risk assess AI systems, and what could that look like? And very much from that sort of point in time, I got exposure to some incredible minds at MIT, and we sort of, I jumped on a plane to go to Boston. I got a 20-minute window with the head of the MIT startup program there. I convinced him to let me join that program. I was still running my legal practice at that time. And then what I did was work with some amazing MIT academics to put together what we call risk correlators. So what are the key sort of questions you need to ask to determine if you've got risk issues when you're either building AI systems or procuring them from third parties or deploying to market? And this was very much at a time when generative AI hadn't even hit the market. So, but what I started to see was there was very few people globally who were, one, doing these risk assessments, and two, they cost a fortune. So I thought, why don't we look to potentially democratize access and put a product around this sort of technology to do risk assessments and generate the governance documentation you need to put tech to market? I saw a market accelerator event. So the EU, the AI Act, which is sort of we call it the seminal piece of legislation governing artificial intelligence, came out. And this was, something like 3.5 years ago. And my background, I've worked in quantum technology, dual tech transfers, built systems before endorsed by DFAT and defense in that space. And I thought this is potentially an area that we can build on. AWS, Amazon, their head prototyping team, APAC, approached me. They'd heard I'd been doing something different in market. They said, let's join forces. They have a program when you can build out in a sort of a very agile way, a 6-week program, a prototype. And we built that prototype. And I would say it's probably the first prototype, particularly in Australia in the APAC region, to a platform that does a risk assessment of AI systems and then supports with generation of governance documentation you need to get that tech to market. So I think I identified a critical market gap. The AI GRC market absolutely didn't exist. But what I would say also is that differentiation of Komply.ai is that, essentially I'm not a tech founder. And my background is lawyer, litigator. I'm probably, I don't fit that profile of the normal funded founder. But I think that differentiation means that I've built my technology differently. So I've built technology I always wanted to exist in mature, decentralized enterprise with cross-functional teams and higher risk sort of enterprise areas. So what we say is that, our tech centralizes AI inventory, it assesses risk, and it meets a number of disparate global regulation relating to artificial intelligence to get that to market. So if you think about a sort of a analogous technology or company, it's the Vanta or the OneTrust for AI safety. And so, some of our work, as I said, we kicked off in 2022. We built this prototype. We beta tested with the largest university in Australia. Then we were invited to launch commercially last year. So we only have been on market for, commercially for about sort of 12 months for opening the AWS Builder Studio, the first outside of the US. And shortly after, what we realized is that we started to align ourselves and work with what we say high risk sectors. So sectors that have been using more traditional forms of artificial intelligence in the form of, machine learning and otherwise for many years. But if they get it wrong, if you're an oil, gas, energy company, you have a predictive maintenance model and, there's some major explosion on a rig site, then your directors go to jail. So what we found that for our technology, one of the best things and being agile and pivoting, at least 4 times was, okay, our sector is high risk sectors, large enterprise that need a system like ours moving forward. So we've had a few wins working with some large universities. I call out University of Sydney, Grading Institute, UQ, partners in working with AWS, working with the government, and then working with, one of our larger clients or customers, one of the major oil, gas, energy companies. We were voted top 4 in the CBA Accelerator event last year. So I think this year is very much, our growth period in terms of the market catching up. to what we have to offer as part of our technology moving forward. I can keep on going, Rita, but I'm just mindful of time.
Oh, well, thank you. Did you want me to just flick through your slides?
Yeah, you can go to Annie and then I can go back to them when we circle back about some of the
All
tech.
right, cool, no worries. Okay, we're going over to Annie. Annie, it's very exciting to have you here today to share with us a bit about your mission. I think a lot of people might be new to the work that you're doing. So if you'd like to tell us a bit about your story, that would be amazing.
Yeah, sounds great. Firstly, really grateful to be here, and thanks for having me on the webinar. Do I just need to navigate forward through the slide?
You want to go to the next one?
Yeah. Is it showing the build class slide for everyone?
Yes.
Awesome. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Annie, the founder of Build Club. So Build Club has changed a lot over the past year, essentially. But at the moment, we're building the best place in the world if you want to learn AI skills and tooling. But we actually started out a year ago as an AI community. And then since then, expanded around the world. And then 7 months ago, raised a venture capital round to build product and build more of an education platform. So at the moment, our main product is we sell to enterprises who want to upskill in AI, our e-learning platform, which is similar to Udemy mixed with Duolingo, but specifically for AI upskilling. And a lot of like our method for AI learning has been like design partnered for what we're seeing come up for our community. But our end mission is we think AI is really, really exciting, as you've probably seen from the two speakers before me. And we think that everyone should have access to AI education. And the world and every role in the workforce is also changing with AI. And we think it's really important that everyone should have access to education to be able, I guess, like stay ahead of the AI curve and really leverage it in their day-to-day roles. Yeah, so that's a bit about like Build Club, but maybe taking a step back, a bit about like my background and kind of falling into the journey of where we are today with Build Club, which is definitely not where we imagined we would be 12 months ago. So I grew up in Canberra and then moved to Sydney for university. Didn't actually study AI or anything. Studied like one of the typical co-op degrees. And then worked at Westpac, and it was during my time at Westpac where I actually learned to code on the job and learned science. And that was very much like learning through doing. And that kind of looks to like dual cultivation later, I guess. But yeah, essentially I was at Westpac and then decided that was something for me, so did a stint at Boston Consulting Group, so strategy consulting on AI projects. And after that, still didn't really know what I wanted to do. So then fell into the world of venture capital, where we worked really closely with a lot of early stage AI founders. And it was during the time I was working in venture capital, we founded Build Club as a community. Essentially, this was when ChatGPT was just taking off, so there was a lot of noise in the market, and also a lot of people that were scared in terms of not knowing the effect that AI would have on their day-to-day roles in the workplace. So I think like a lot of, I guess like, yeah, noise in the market. And Build Club is a safe community for people to really collaborate with AI because it's so fast moving. A lot of people find face-to-face connection really good for just like discussing the latest AI trends, sharing what tools they're using, things like that. So that's how Build Club started essentially. And then even though it was started more as like a family community, what we found was that more and more people that wanted to learn AI joined Build Club. So we started to pivot more towards AI education. So we partner with like top AI companies, for example, the Australian ones, Relevance AI, we do a lot of work with, where they build like AI agent workflows, and also lots of companies in San Francisco, like right here, Julius AI, Windsurf, so a lot of like very hot companies at the moment. We work with them directly to create like little courses for people to do, all based on the concept of Japanese language. With Build Club, kind of like in the name, people learn for building. And what we've done with the platform is like taken what we think is the best method for people to learn AI to translate that to a work set. Yeah, so that's kind of what we focus on at the moment, is the split between the product. We also do a lot of work still in the community, which has been probably one of the most rewarding parts of doing this, because I used to just run it in like my nights and weekends, but now since I'm full-time with Build Club, we can actually put a lot more effort into our community. So now we're in more than 20 cities around the world, and we run what we call like co-working. So you don't have to know how to code to like attend a co-working. It's just for anyone that wants to learn AI, and we give people free access to our platform, so you can like hop on there, like do a course, and at the end of co-working, actually like present a little AI project you've built. That's essentially where we're at the moment. We're just like building. We have a few like early enterprise customers who are using our e-learning platform, and just focusing on like working with them. I'm sure.
Annie, your story is so inspirational, and I think it's amazing to hear what an impact community can have. And I'm going to stop presenting now, because I'm going to move to questions. And I really want people to think about, I encourage each and everyone to get into the spirit of accelerating action. We've heard some amazing stories today. And so whether you're on the call as an inspiring entrepreneur or a seasoned professional or simply curious, I encourage you to ask some questions. We're taking questions in the chat. I'm going to start with some questions because I just think these ladies are just amazing. And my first one is really for Fee, and that also you, Fee and Annie and Kristen, if you have questions, let's get them out as well. But Fee, I'm really fascinated. Are you thinking about other fruits?
We get asked it all the time. We've been asked like every fruit that you could imagine. We've been asked if we can do the same thing. So there's a couple of criteria that I look for in other fruits. For me, the really important thing is that the fruit has to be something that's been constantly picked. So if, say, like an orange, you have one picking event, so you grow your orange tree and your flowers all flower at the same time, and then you come in, you have one picking event at the end of the season, then it's less, like, it's still really important to know the yield, but the problem isn't as great. So when you're trying to, and you can put oranges into like a cold facility and then slowly drip them out into the market, whereas your soft fruit, they've got such a short shelf life and you've got to pick them every 2 days, and that could be, depending on where you are in the world, a 4-week period or a 25-week period. And so when we look to expand, we're really looking at those sort of fruit and vegetables that you're constantly picking out over a large period of time and having to tell your supplier or your commercial team what's coming. We wanted to go really deep into everything about berries first and really exhaust that out and stay really focused with the customers that we have and give them really good value. But we're almost at that point. So at some stage in the not too distant future, we will look at other crops as well.
Exciting. Okay, my next question's for Annie. How did you figure out that you could build a community and get venture capital to pay for that? Like, what was the key thing you were saying to the venture capitalists that you would deliver? Is she frozen? No.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi dropped out. Could you please repeat it? Sorry, my Wi-Fi just dropped out.
Oh, no, don't worry. I thought it was, because I wasn't sure whether you were looking extra happy or like. It's all right. I'll save the question for when your Wi-Fi comes back. So, Kristen, do you have any questions for the other panel members? Because I know you're fascinated by what's going on here.
I think maybe for both of them, and going back to my area of interest in terms of creating safer and responsible artificial intelligence, maybe this is a good one for Annie and the community that she's building. What are your sort of observations of market in the engineers or the data scientists or the startups that you're working with in terms of their understanding of creating AI, but making sure that they've got the right sort of safety guardrails and things in place from the outset? Is that something that is well known? Because my sort of observation in market is that it's really an area that is not well known, and so there's new ISO standards or there's no ISO standards around certain areas, and so very much there's a gap in that AI literacy area of around AI safety and things. And so we've got this sort of tsunami of new laws coming, and we've got AI builders trying to build out technology and innovate. So what is your general observation of some of the people that you work with in terms of their general understanding, and not only their understanding but their placement of importance on those issues?
I think from what I've seen, I probably divide it into like two buckets of people. So we have people in our community who are like very hyper engaged and with like in AI, like try to stay really up to date with it. And then there's also a perspective from what we're seeing when we're like talking to more enterprise people, I guess. I'd say our community is like, so these are people that like to like get on top of the latest tools when they come out. Because they're like to read a lot of space, they're like engaged with it. So we've had like a lot of internal like knowledge groups, discussion groups to where people have like organically been like, okay, this like the new standard for like user testing. Yeah, what does that mean for us as builders? There's definitely like that awareness, but a lot of lack of structure around like, okay, how do we interpret this? And like just people bouncing ideas off each other. It is moving like very, very quickly, and I think a lot of people are scared, not really sure like how to interpret things. So there's a lot of people leaning on each other in our community. Um, Definitely from the enterprise perspective, it's like one of our courses on our platform is on like security and ethics, and that's definitely one which people are like very interested in. Um, I feel like AI is still very, very early in a lot of companies where they're just starting to experiment with Copilot and things like that. Um, and I think education plays a big part. I think AI
What
Thank
about
you.
you, Fee? Have you found anything in that space?
Yeah, I suppose for us, because computer vision's been around for a while now. There's some pretty solid standards and ways of training and version control and testing and knowing the results that you're getting and testing for biases in your data and things like that we're here to. I think it's interesting from a customer point of view, like our customers are ag and you kind of have the perception, that they're a little bit behind the times. But, our customers are saying to us that their customers, so one particular example is one customer who grows for Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's are now setting up longer contracts with them because they're giving them the AI data, and then they have confidence that they're being grown sustainably, that the forecasts are coming in right, and that they're doing sort of all of these things, and they've got the AI data to prove it where they haven't been able to prove it before. So they're getting longer term contracts, at higher value because of that. And so there is a trust that's going into this data that mainstream business, whatever industry you own, that the outputs are being trusted. So I think as AI professionals, we have to bring integrity and values and ethics into how we're training our models and what we're releasing to our customers, and making sure that is of a high quality.
Yeah, and I think that I've said this before. I think, from a competitive advantage standpoint, trust is absolutely key, trust and safety for AI. And I think, sometimes the tech sector celebrates this move fast and break things. But my background, in technology and law has taught me that sometimes, once something's broken, it can be difficult to repair. like trust and safety. And so, as a company, Komply.ai sort of exists in, in very much attention. Like, we're building innovative technology that enables other organizations to innovate responsibly, but it's about finding that balance between enabling progress while ensuring that there's appropriate safety guards, and making sure that you address those things from the outset. Because if you don't get these things right from the outset, it could actually mean that you're retrofitting, and it could cost you a fortune in rebuilding the technology moving forward. So I think it's also that changing conversation about, and as Fee observed, like, this is a competitive advantage. If you start seeing, bigger contracts and contractual terms of what you have to put in place, and you don't have them in place, you miss those contracts and you miss that sort of bottom line advantage. So yeah, no, thank you for sharing that.
And very sage advice. Thanks, Kristen. I've got a question from the audience. Thank you, Dane from Tooth Fairy AI. And the question is around, what specific strategies or initiatives do you believe would be most effective in attracting women to AI-related fields, but also retaining and advancing them? Like, we have 3 amazing women in that space. What strategies have you found that is great for attracting women to AI?
So I don't mind taking this one to start with. So we have had many women work within Bitwise, and currently we're over 50% women. We haven't had any particular strategies other than during our recruitment, we seem to get a lot of women apply for the jobs because I think they see female leadership. And know that maybe females are more understanding of the family problems and cultural problems that we're experiencing of women in the workforce. All the women at Bitwise have young families, and we really trust the people that work with us and have flexible working. Our head of AI, Annie, who's on the call, is a woman. She's amazing. We would be nowhere without her. And it's about flexibility and trust. We know that she always goes above and beyond for us, and so we give her the flexibility that she needs with her family, and that works really well with our business. We all have to do out of hours because we've got customers all over the world, and so we try to give that back in time during the day, and just work collaboratively with our staff because we're all in it together.
Love it, Fee. What about you?
Yeah, look, I'd add there's obviously systemic and incumbent areas that make that question very difficult from a sort of a human and personal point of view. But what I think is missing from the market is very much, something that I also represent is this group of women who may have been in professional services for many years. Like, I was in professional services for 20 plus years. So some of the skill set that those people bring is running large companies, reporting to board, financial budgeting, and all the things that you actually need to create a sustainable business moving forward. And so in terms of like attracting those people, I think that there's sort of cross-functional skill sets that you might miss. So you don't necessarily have to be a technical female founder who's, an engineer or a data scientist to be successful in artificial intelligence. And I think, my history has sort of shown that. So I think if you can tap into some of those areas that may not be the traditional stream that women come into from, say, professional services, that will help you run a long-standing business moving forward. That's very much something that you should be looking at moving forward, and very much part of our sort of strategy. But I would say, and be honest on this call, that the statistics are pretty horrible, and we've got a really long way to go. And sort of, I feel like, I come from a privileged position. I had superannuation. I had a professional career, which meant that I could bootstrap my company. I have a good network. But then when I look at some of these other female founders that have no network, don't have that sort of safety network around them, I think, these are the people that we should be funding, because the barriers and obstacles that they have got to get to their position is frankly incredible. So Look, I don't know if there's an easy answer, but I feel that, we should look beyond the traditional view of who is the right founder or who is the right employee when we're looking at artificial intelligence, because it's such a revolutionary technology, and I think that we can cast a wider net, is my view.
Thanks, Kristen. Annie.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's not a very easy question to answer, but maybe just speaking from personal experience, definitely to Fee's point, I think culture in the workplace plays a big part. And just like creating a safe space, like even I guess like a lot of people I hang out around still are relatively early in their tech careers, like 20 to 30-year-old. And even just like calling out, like slang, if you get called like bro in the workplace, it actually can create a very uncomfortable environment for like a young woman in the workforce. So I think culture plays a big part of it. And then probably like one thing I found has really like helped myself and like a lot of close friends is like mentorship, and more one-on-one like mentorship from like senior women who are maybe like one or two career steps ahead. For example, at the moment, I live in like a hacker house, and there's like two other female founders, and like one of them's almost like a mum to me. She's like a bit older than me, but like has offered like really good advice, and that's like helped me a lot, just like settling into like a new country. So I think having mentors who have like been there and like going through similar things is actually really invaluable, and like creating environments where that can happen. Yeah.
Annie, I love that you live in a hacker house. It's just amazing. And that's in San Fran.
Yes, in San Francisco at the moment, but heading back to Australia soon.
Cool. Well, we missed you. Come back soon. But how many communities? I heard that you even did a was it like a relationship hackathon, or what was the actual words?
Valentine's Day hackathon. It was actually crazy. Like the ex-CEO of Tinder was one of the guest speakers there. So yeah, it was good. It was
I
all
love
local
her app.
singles. Yeah, after Valentine's Day. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
because I know she has the app Mino, which is the one that gives you kind of relationships advice and stuff. She's very inspirational.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Okay, so I've got more questions from the audience. So the question is, what has the appetite been overall when it comes to funding investments in AI startups? Have you noticed a difference in public government funding versus private funding expectations? And Annie, I think because you're the most recent at getting funding, can I get you to answer that first?
I definitely think AI is still very hot at the moment. I think if you look at from the venture capital perspective, a lot of the recent investments which the larger VC firms have made in Australia, they're all in AI companies. AI, vertical AI, B2B SaaS is still very hot at the moment. So I'd say the appetite's still pretty big, and we've seen a lot of companies grow like very quickly recently too, who are like creating AI versions of particular solutions to disrupt industries. I'm not too familiar with like the public funding side though. Yeah.
Okay. Fee?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. Like appetite to invest in AI is pretty big at the moment. I think it's more like traditional AI businesses. I think for us in ag tech, we're seen as ag tech in the sort of slower cycle. There's less chance of becoming a Canva or a Facebook or something like that in ag tech. And we're often seen as ag tech rather than AI, when really we're an AI company. But I do think people are getting a little bit cautious about things that are built on top of ChatGPT, and then all of a sudden ChatGPT brings out a new feature, and like a whole lot of startups are like wiped off the market. I would kind of see that in government as well, when you're sort of claiming the R&D tax refund and things like that. They're really delving down in the AI companies to make sure that it is R&D that's happening, and it's not just something being built on top of something else. the R&D tax initiative is awesome, and what used to be the commercialization, accelerating commercialization, was investing in a lot of artificial intelligence companies, and then the new, I can't remember the new name for it. It changes names, every few years, but is also a really good, government grant system that seem to be quite focused on AI at the moment.
So glad you love the R&D, because I hang out with them now at the department. So it's a really important piece of funding.
Rita,
Kristen,
maybe I can jump in and also give a bit of a different perspective on that one. We're in the middle of raising at the moment. We just opened our first round. But what I would also say is, like, initially when we bootstrapped sort of to this point, that there's a lot of hype around venture capital funding and artificial intelligence, and sometimes it's also good to turn off the noise and the hype around those things. And what we recognized early, and based on statistics, that 0.7% of all solo females get funded in this country. And so I'm a pretty practical person, and I thought, like, the statistics are against me. So if I want to get a springboard to market and I want to continue to build the tech, is there another way to do this without funding? And I think as a founder and someone, trying to disrupt a market and do things differently, we're good at doing things differently, and we're good at finding alternative paths. So what I did was I went and studied, and I learnt a new area. I looked at working with people, the top experts who are aligned with this responsible artificial intelligence sort of mentality, who were then charging and costing me some of their work at a very low price, because they believed in me and believed in what I was doing and what I was trying to achieve. I ended up, obviously partnering with large tech to build out sort of the first prototype version. So I think also realistically, like, there's lots of discussion about go out and get venture capital funding. It is incredibly hard. And if you really believe in what you're doing, and you believe that, you're going to get to a point, then, and you as a founder can do it, there's ways to do that in an alternative basis. And then going to that point of, funding, we've very much capitalized on the R&D grant in terms of, we were doing research and development and in stealth for many years. So we capitalized on that, and that was incredibly helpful for us as a company. So what I would say is that think very carefully about when you raise, how much you raise, who you approach to raise, and if it's the right thing for you as a organization and as a company, because there's sort of key questions that you need to ask, because it's not all glamorous. It's incredibly time consuming, and the statistics, if we're being really frank, talking about either solo female founders or two women founding teams, is incredibly low. So yeah, let me just bring that to the conversation.
Okay, I've got two people asking me this question, so it's obviously very popular. So the question is, what is the biggest challenges you found as being a founder in the AI sector, like as being a woman? I'm going to start with Annie. What have you found the biggest challenges of being a woman in the founder in tech?
I wouldn't say it's like related to like being a woman, but maybe just like general in terms of like founder challenges. I guess like when I raised, we were like pre-product. It was just me and the team. And there's a lot of risk associated with that. I'm also like not like super technical. Like, I studied data science, but I wouldn't be able to manage like a software engineering team. So building like a solid team around me is still one of like the biggest challenges. I think if you ask any founder, they would say like team is probably one of the hardest things to nail, and it's constantly changing too for like every stage of the business which you're at. So that's something which we're like constantly like iterating through at the moment. So for context, we started with like a small original team in Australia. So we were all kind of like working remote, and then moved to San Francisco because a lot of our partnerships are in SF, and then we've kind of rebuilt the team here. But still very, very new and like a very different dynamic. So that's like fun to explore. And then also probably more related to like our business itself, because AI is so fast moving. Like whenever we create a course, the company which we partner with for the course might like update their platform in like 1 month time or
Oh
something.
no.
So because AI is so fast moving, like having curriculum which actually keeps up to date with that, is probably one of like a good challenge and also a good like business opportunity. I guess in terms of like delivering really good AI education. But yeah, these are probably two of the things like top of mind at the moment.
Wonderful, Annie. Kristen?
Look, I agree with Annie. I sort of talk and think about challenges as two key areas. So there's obviously, as a startup founder, there's market challenges and there's human challenges, and they both obviously intersect with one another. And I think, in terms of market challenges, our challenge, personally, was we were too early to market. We created the AI governance risk compliance market, which meant that we needed patient capital. It also meant we needed to be incredibly agile and read the market to change. And so, we've iterated 4 times over. I think in terms of human challenges, skills, teams, personality, operating as a sort of a non-traditional founder, and going back to your question, Rita, realistically, it brings challenges every day. I've said this, I think, before to you. There are conscious and unconscious biases that you experience as a female founder, and you get knocked down every day. But I think in terms of what you need to do to address those challenges, to take a sort of a positive spin is it's just resilience. And if you're doing some of the hardest things for a longest period of time, you're going to beat people and you're going to win in market. And I think if you can do that as a founder, generally, you can sort of overcome a lot of those challenges. But look, it's not easy, but I've said this as well in other sort of discussions. It's the most exciting thing I've ever done in my life. I've been a litigator and a lawyer. I'm a mum of 2 young children, 6 and 10. Not that this is more exciting than being a mum, but building a company and building technology from the ground up and making sure that there's some future impact is super cool. And that's why you get out of bed every morning, because you try and make a difference. And that's really important, I think, for the messaging for this group.
That's amazing. And thank you so much. And I can imagine it must be super exciting. Tell me about the challenges for you, Fee.
Yeah, challenges are an interesting one. So for me, I've been lucky enough to work in ag and then work in technology as well, and have sort of long careers in both. So, it is hard being a woman in both of those industries. And I think my 20 years experience before I got into the startup game gave me all the sort of hard knocks and bruises and battle scars and scar tissue that I needed to get through the startup journey. So it doesn't sort of phase me too much being the only woman. But I think the biggest challenge there that we face is that our market is overseas. So it is hard not being over there. And we've managed to raise $4 million to date, and we're raising at the moment, and we'll use that to build our AI from scratch, which takes a massive investment. So to service customers overseas, I would love to have a hub overseas and be living over where the bulk of our customers are, where I can rub shoulders with them and talk farm and smell the earth and rub it between my fingers and all those things that farmers like to do, and that builds credibility. So I think that's our biggest challenge. But we spend a lot of time overseas. That helps us overcome it. But I do think that as women in general, like this whole, the Women in International Women's Day is about accelerating action. And I do think we're at a phase where we do need to accelerate that. So I think a challenge that I see around that is that we need to have the men in the room for these conversations, and put that out there for next year, that every woman out there should bring their dad, their cousin, their son, their brother, their whoever, who may be a decision maker in a company that can really change the outcome for the next generation of women coming through.
I love that initiative, Fee. That is such a positive idea. I was thinking of it, some kind of AI filter that could make us look like men, but that's a much better idea. But I'd like to thank everyone who came along to this incredible webinar today. It's been so empowering for me, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken to be involved. We're going to have this recording available, and thank you to everyone that attended. I'm just going to close by just sharing some final feedback from the NAIC, so that if you want to continue knowing more about the National AI Centre, give us a follow on LinkedIn, sign up for our newsletter, and we look forward to being part of continuing to celebrate International Women's Day with our female founders. So thank you. Going to get to that slide in a minute, and thank you so much for everyone for being part of this session today.
Thank you.
Bye. Ciao.